Imagine walking onto your old college campus. You're expecting, the warm embrace of nostalgia.
Oh, absolutely.
You anticipate the big tents on the campus lawn, the little name tags, effortlessly reconnecting with old friends. But instead of that, you realize the institution you loved is now like this highly vulnerable data fortress fighting off cyber attacks.
Right, which is quite the shock.
Totally. And instead of a fun weekend, you're faced with a systemic crisis that your completely fragmented graduating class is entirely unequipped to handle.
Yeah, that sharp collision between our sort of romanticized memories of the past and the really stark systemic realities of the present. It's something pretty much every modern institution is grappling with right now.
Well, welcome to our deep dive. Today, we are taking a single, highly concentrated source and extracting the blueprint it offers for survival in the modern academic world.
It's a really fascinating one.
It is. We're looking at a short, reflective piece titled Nostalgia and Knowledge at Manasa Gangotri. And the mission for you, our listener, is to understand how human networks, specifically academic communities, evolve.
And why they fail.
Exactly. Why they so often fail to connect. And what the massive gulf between a 1970s college experience and today's digital reality actually means for the future of these schools.
So the setup for this text is, well, it's deceptively simple. The author is preparing for a trip next week to their alma mater.
Right, Manasa Gangotri over in Mysore, India.
Right, and they are attending the Diamond Jubilee function of the Library Science Department.
Which is a 60-year celebration. I mean, that's a massive milestone for any department.
It is huge, but the author's own background isn't actually in library science. They completed their basic education at the same institution, earning an MSc in physics back in 1973.
Oh, wow, so over 50 years ago.
Exactly. So they are stepping back onto a campus that holds these deeply embedded, decades-old memories. But almost immediately, the author points out a pretty glaring disparity.
Between the department throwing this massive party and their own right.
Yeah, the contrast is incredibly sharp. You've got the Library Science Department, which has an alumni association strong enough, organized enough, and financially backed enough to pull off a literal Diamond Jubilee.
Right.
Meanwhile, the author's own physics department lacks any organized institutional backing from its alumni.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the irony here is just, well, it's too perfect to ignore.
It really is.
Think about the fundamental nature of these two disciplines. The Library Science Department is populated by people whose literal academic focus revolves around categorizing, organizing, cataloging, and preserving connections.
Right. They study taxonomy and metadata for a living.
Exactly. So it completely tracks that they are incredible at organizing themselves into a sustainable, long-term human network.
What's fascinating here is that they essentially apply their academic discipline to their own community.
And then, on the flip side, you have the physicists. I mean, these are people who dedicate their lives to studying the fundamental forces of attraction in the universe.
Gravity, electromagnetism, all of it.
Yeah, the forces that literally bind matter together to prevent the universe from dissolving into chaos. And yet, when it comes to their own human community, they're just completely struggling to keep everyone in orbit.
That orbit is decaying, right. And the text actually gives us a very subtle diagnosis of why that's happening.
What do they say?
It notes that for the physics department, there is an alumni group for that specific 1973 batch, but it only exists, quote, thanks to the efforts of some.
Thanks to the efforts of some. Wow.
Right. A larger departmental organization never actually materialized. And that phrasing tells us everything we need to know about the anatomy of failing communities.
It's the difference between having actual institutional scaffolding and just, grassroots exhaustion.
Yes. Grassroots exhaustion is the perfect term for it.
I really want to dig into that concept because efforts of some sounds so incredibly familiar to, I think, anyone listening. It's like trying to hold water in a net.
Oh, completely.
In every friend group or family or graduating class, there's always that one person who desperately tries to keep the group chat alive,
The one who organizes all the dinners.
Yeah. They set the updates. They track down people's new email addresses when they change jobs.
And the emotional and logistical toll of being that singular node in a network is just massive.
It really is.
When community building relies entirely on the unpaid, often unrecognized labor of a few dedicated individuals, it has a built-in expiration date.
So that 1973 batch is basically just surviving on grassroots energy.
Exactly. But grassroots energy eventually burns out. The library science department, conversely, they built a machine.
Right?
They likely have succession plans, membership dues, dedicated communication channels. It's a system that runs regardless of who is actually at the helm.
Well, the physics department is basically relying on a few people manually turning a crank. And I mean, 50 years later, their arms are getting pretty tired.
Very tired. But the author isn't just writing this to complain about their tired arms.
No, they actually pivot, don't they?
They do. They pivot from this diagnosis to offer a very specific blueprint for the next generation. They express a hope that current students and staff of the physics department will look at the library science jubilee and start their own official alumni association.
Right, to kind of take a leaf out of their book. But they offer a strategic twist, though.
Yeah, they suggest that the physics department should do this either independently or by teaming up with the chemistry and mathematics departments.
Now, I have to push back on this proposed alliance a little bit. Why group physics, chemistry, and math together?
It does seem a bit random at first glance.
Right. Like, are we just throwing all the hard sciences into one bucket because we assume they lack the social engineering skills of the humanities? It feels a bit like a marriage of convenience.
You think they're just huddling together for warmth?
Yeah. Is the author implying that hard science departments inherently view community building differently, so they just need to pool their meager social resources?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, I'd actually push that a step further and look at the underlying mechanics of how modern universities operate.
Okay, how so?
This isn't just a marriage of convenience. It is a highly pragmatic survival tactic for academic networking, because academic departments are essentially competing organisms within the larger ecosystem of a university.
Right, they're fighting for resources.
Exactly. They are constantly vying for grant funding, for prestige, for lab space, and for top-tier corporate partnerships.
So an alumni network isn't just about planning a nice dinner. It's a mechanism for actual leverage.
Precisely. A siloed physics department from 1973 might only attract a few specialized recruiters or a handful of modest donations. They just don't have the gravitational pull to sustain a large-scale institutional voice.
But when you combine them.
Right. When you combine physics, chemistry, and math, you are aggregating a massive chunk of the university's STEM alumni base. These are disciplines that share a similar epistemological framework.
Meaning they fundamentally solve problems and analyze data in the exact same way. So let's translate that into real-world impact for the listener. If they solve problems the same way, they probably end up in very similar industries, right?
That is the key mechanism here. They are filtering into tech, engineering, pharmaceuticals, and advanced research. They have completely overlapping corporate pipelines.
Oh, I see.
If those three departments form a coalition, it can suddenly go to a major tech firm and say, hey, we represent a unified block of thousands of STEM graduates from this university.
And that kind of leverage brings in endowed shares, massive research grants, and direct job pipelines for current students.
It changes the game entirely. The library's science department figured out institutional power early on. The author is realizing that the hard sciences need to achieve critical mass just to catch up.
But, that unified voice to protect the institution only really works if there's something specific threatening it. I mean, you don't build a fortress unless you anticipate a siege.
That's a great point.
And this text accidentally reveals exactly what that modern threat is. Which brings us to the most jarring part of the entire narrative.
The tonal shift in the author's agenda is just remarkable.
It really is. I mean, we spent all this time exploring sentimental memories of 1973, the irony of physicists failing to connect, blueprints for department coalitions.
All very traditional academic topics.
Right. And then the author drops the actual purpose of their visit to the Diamond Jubilee. They are looking forward to interacting with the audience, sure. But the title of the talk they are giving.
Yeah, it's quite something.
Impact of cyber laws and the data protection law on academic institutions.
So from a master's degree in physics half a century ago, directly into the crosshairs of modern data protection laws.
So what does this all mean? The whiplash is literally giving me vertigo.
It's a huge jump.
You start with this warm, fuzzy nostalgia of walking the grounds where you got your basic education, and then bam, dense legal liability and cybersecurity.
It's quite the wake-up call.
It is literally like arriving at a warm, sentimental high school reunion, seeing the balloons, hearing the old songs, and the moment you step through the door, someone hands you a 50-page legal waiver and asks you to audit their firewall.
This raises an important question, though. It shatters the illusion, doesn't it? But it perfectly captures the reality of modern academia.
How so?
Well, We collectively tend to romanticize universities as these sleepy, ivy-covered physical spaces. We picture the quad, the dusty archives, the quiet lecture halls where people debate philosophy.
Wait, I'm struggling to connect A to B here. I understand that universities use computers, obviously. But how does an aging physicist talking about cyber law fundamentally change the nature of the university? Are they implying the physical campus is under attack?
Not physically, no.
Right.
They were pointing out that a university is no longer just a physical place. It is an incredibly complex, highly vulnerable data hub.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Think about the sheer volume of sensitive information a modern academic institution holds. You have the financial records and banking details of tens of thousands of students.
Right.
You have unpatented, cutting-edge medical and technological research data just sitting on university servers. You have massive financial endowments being managed internally.
So they're holding intellectual property that could be worth billions right alongside the Social Security numbers of 18-year-olds.
Exactly. And universities, by their very nature, champion open access and collaboration.
Right. They want to share information.
Yeah, their networks are fundamentally designed to be open to students and researchers around the world, which makes them incredibly soft targets in the digital age.
That sounds like a nightmare for IT.
It is. They are prime targets for ransomware, state-sponsored corporate espionage, and data breaches. So the physical campus is secondary now. The university is primarily a massive digital infrastructure that requires intense, relentless legal and technological safeguarding.
Okay, that completely reframes the entire purpose of the author's visit.
Yeah.
And honestly, the purpose of the alumni network itself.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, the author isn't just going back to reminisce about 1973 over some tea. They are going back as an expert to warn and advise the institution on how to survive in a pretty hostile digital landscape.
Let's tie that back to the blueprint we discussed earlier. The author's urgent plea for the physics, math, and chemistry departments to build a robust, combined alumni network isn't just about fundraising.
No, it's way bigger than that.
This modern threat of cyber law and data vulnerability is exactly why those cross-disciplinary networks are desperately needed.
Because universities simply can't fight off these threats alone.
A university administration simply cannot keep pace with the bleeding edge of cybersecurity and data protection law on an academic budget. They just can't.
Right, they don't have the money.
They need their alumni. They need the people who left the university, went out into the corporate world, became tech CEOs, cybersecurity experts, and data privacy lawyers.
So the network acts as a shield.
Yes. If an institution doesn't have a massive network of engaged alumni to draw upon for guidance, pro bono compliance audits, or infrastructure donations, they're at a severe existential disadvantage.
So the network is no longer just a social club. It is protective armor.
Exactly. The library science department isn't just throwing a 60-year jubilee to feel good. They are flexing a modern survival mechanism.
Wow.
By keeping their alumni organized and engaged, they have built an active resource pool that the institution can activate the exact moment the digital world comes knocking.
And the author is looking at their own fragmented physics department and realizing what?
Realizing by failing to organize ourselves, we are leaving our alma mater incredibly vulnerable.
We're leaving the gates completely unguarded. I mean, the nostalgia is just the hook that brings the author back to Manasa Gangotri. But the reality of today demands that they stand at the podium and talk about data protection.
The past and the present are colliding right there on the stage.
It really forces us to recognize that the skills required to survive in academia have fundamentally shifted,
Absolutely.
In 1973, a struggling physics department just meant fewer attendees at a reunion dinner, or maybe a slightly smaller budget for new lab equipment.
Right, the stakes were pretty low.
But today, a disorganized department means a literal lack of institutional defense. It means when new data protection laws are passed, the university doesn't have a network of policymakers to help them navigate the compliance maze.
It's been quite a journey unpacking this short, reflective piece.
Let's trace the through line of what we've discovered today. We started with the very human, nostalgic pull of a 1973 physics degree and the magnetic desire to return to a formative physical place.
And from there, we examined the uneven landscape of community building. We saw the irony of the library science department acting as a well-oiled organizational machine.
While the physicists, the literal students of universal attraction, relied on the exhausting grassroots efforts of a few individuals just to keep a single graduating class connected.
Which is still so crazy to think about.
It is. We looked at the proposed solution, the tactical coalition of physics, chemistry, and math. We explored how merging these epistemologically similar hard sciences isn't just about socializing, but about achieving critical mass,
It's about building leverage for funding, corporate pipelines, and institutional power.
which ultimately led us to the core revelation of the text. The jarring pivot from sentimental nostalgia to the cold, hard realities of cyber laws and data protection.
Right. We uncovered how the modern academic institution has transformed from an ivy-covered sanctuary into a highly vulnerable data fortress.
And we saw how a unified alumni network functions not as a party planning committee, but as the essential protective armor a university needs to survive systemic digital threats.
So as you, the listener, absorb all of this, we really encourage you to cast a critical eye on your own networks.
Think about your college alumni association, your professional industry groups, or even your local community organizations.
Ask yourself, who is actually doing the heavy lifting?
Who is the person manually turning the crank, sending the emails, and fighting off grassroots exhaustion to keep your community from evaporating?
And perhaps more importantly, evaluate the utility of that network. As the landscape around you changes, is your community structured in a way that can actually protect and support its members through modern crises?
Or are you all just surviving on the fading fumes of a past shared experience, holding water in a net?
It certainly makes you want to send a thank you note to the organizers in your life, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The ones refusing to let the gravity of your group dissipate. Which leaves us with a final, lingering thought to explore long after this deep dive ends.
We began by talking about the physical pull of a reunion, the anticipation of walking across the campus lawn, touching the brick of the old library, sitting in the same lecture hall.
But if a modern academic institution is now defined just as much by its massive digital footprint, its servers full of intellectual property, and its vulnerability as a global data hub, what does it truly mean to be an alumnus in the digital age?
That's the real question.
When we feel that sudden, sharp pang of nostalgia for our college days, when we feel that pull to return, are we really longing for a physical geographic location?
Or are we just trying to locate our past selves within the localized network of data, institutional memory, and human connections that we left behind?
We spend so much energy worrying about whether we can successfully herd everyone back to the physical campus.
Yeah.
But maybe the real challenge is realizing that the campus itself is digitized.
Hey.
And that gravitational pull we feel in our chests, it might just be a signal, constantly searching the dark for a secure network connection. Something for you to chew on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.